This week on Inside Scoop, Scott Bessent, the man meets his moment. Who's really to blame for the food shortage in Gaza? And is it lights out for late night television? Welcome to Inside Scoop, where we talk about all the news that's fit to print in the Washington Examiner magazine. I'm Jim Antle, your host, and this week on the cover is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Bessent had been rumored to be a candidate for the next chairman of the Federal Reserve, but now he's staying put in the Treasury Department. Our Salena Zito caught up with him as to why this may be right where he's needed right now.
Well, I love Scott, but he wants to stay where he is. I'll take him off because I asked him just last night, is this something you want? Nope, I want to stay where I am. He actually said, I want to work with you. It's such an honor. I said, that's very nice. I appreciate that. But no, Scott wants to do what he's doing. He's doing a great job.
Bessent has become an architect, but also a chief public explainer of the second-term Trump economic agenda.
President Trump's doing peace deals, tax deals, trade deals. We've got the tax deal in place. There are two ways to address it, the affordability crisis. You can stop the inflation, and you can have a very strong real wage gains, which is what I think this manufacturing renaissance is going to do.
But of course, a controversial aspect of the Trump economic agenda is tariffs.
Alexander Hamilton, who was the original tariff man, used tariffs for two reasons. One, to fund the government. Two, to protect U.S. industry. And now President Trump is using tariffs as an instrument of foreign policy.
So the Trump administration is hoping that the use of tariffs will help reshore American jobs back here in the United States and also encourage foreign governments to make other concessions to the United States and hopefully U.S. manufacturing in exchange for access to U.S. markets at lower tariff rates than might otherwise be the case. Many other economists, however, are concerned that the tariffs will lead to higher prices and feed into consumers' and voters' attitudes about the high cost of living in the United States. President Trump won his second term in the White House as many voters were disenchanted with the high inflation during the Biden administration and wanted to see a return to the pre-pandemic Trump first-term economic boom of circa 2019. That saw low unemployment, high economic growth, and low inflation. Now, while inflation has been trending back downward, it is cumulative, so prices are still about 20% higher than they were at that point in 2019 that some people have nostalgia for. But Scott Bessent has been out there making the case that the policy mix of tax cuts, deregulation, and tariffs selectively imposed are going to produce an industrial and manufacturing renaissance that will lead to higher wages and will still keep prices under control over time. Bessent and Trump have a close personal relationship, despite Bessent having no record in the first Trump administration, and he's become one of the stars of the second-term Trump team. He's frequently out front in the media, and he is one of the more respected officials in the Trump administration when it comes to discussing and defending this trade policy in the American business community. A lot is riding on whether Trump and Bessent are right about how this trade policy will affect inflation, jobs, economic growth, the stock market, and the overall stability of the economy. What do you think? Comment down below and let us know. This week I'm joined by commentary senior editor and my predecessor, Seth Mandel, who's written a piece for this week's issue about the situation in Gaza. Hi, Seth.
Hey, Jim. How's it going?
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining me this week.
Thank you.
And so you've written a piece, there's been a lot of talk about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and you've written a piece arguing that a lot of what the conventional wisdom says about this isn't really true, that clearly there's a lot of suffering of the civilian population in Gaza, but both the fact patterns and who's to blame is not necessarily what a lot of people are saying.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that there's obvious misery happening in Gaza. And the larger question is whose fault is that? But it is important also to try to quantify as best as possible what that misery amounts to. It's been very difficult to pin down exactly, what's going on inside Gaza, obviously. But the main thing is that there are systems in place, and as we analyze the systems and how they work, we can see what the outcome is. For example, recently, after Israel allowed a lot more aid to come in, they paused the fighting and they allowed aid to come in. And they allowed it to come through the United Nations, which hadn't been delivering much aid because Israel had been using the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this alternative organization. So the UN has been bringing in food, and according to the UN's own statistics, something like 87% of it in the last 2 months never made it to its destination. So 87% is most of that. That's most of the food. So what's happening? Well, the system in place when the UN delivers food is that Israel cannot guard the convoys and escort them to where they need to go. That basically Israel's role stops at the crossings, and the UN takes it from there. The UN has been using Gaza Civil Police, which is essentially Hamas. It's part of the government.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, so again, you look at the system and you say, all right, Israel is not allowed to guide those trucks and guard those trucks any further. But when the food goes missing, the UN says, well, this is because Israel wasn't letting enough food in. And so people are mobbing the trucks and whatever. And so, the big thing with Israel is that it's sort of getting blamed when it lets food in, it gets blamed when it doesn't let food in, right? It's a kind of circular thing for them. And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was an attempt to get around this specific problem. It was an attempt to have something that, although the Israelis didn't control it per se, the IDF were able to guard a perimeter of the distribution sites, the GHF distribution sites, and therefore they could exert some type of control over what the environment was like. There's still plenty of chaos, and sometimes you solve some problems and other ones crop up in their stead. But the point
Right.
was that a lot of what Israel is doing is trying to gain control over the situation in a way that when they're held responsible for something, they will also be responsible for that and what happens.
So what do we know about what's happening to the food when food goes missing? Is Hamas taking it? Is it random people? Are they stealing it? What do we know about what's actually happening?
Well, we know through videos, we know through testimony, we know through eyewitness accounts, whistleblowers and dissidents and all that Hamas is in control of the lion's share of the aid. In control doesn't mean as soon as it comes across the border, Hamas steals it or that Hamas hijacks every truck. But again, we go back to the system in place. Hamas is the government. So anything that goes anywhere in Gaza is doing so at the behest of the government, and the government is Hamas. So some Hamas steals, some Hamas is given as, their cut, you would say, for either guarding the trucks as they drive them to the warehouses, or things like that. And some once they are in position to be guarding the warehouses, which they also got, not just the trucks to the warehouse, but the warehouses themselves, they have access to the food. And they have also forced Palestinians into this sort of mafia-style protection racket where a lot of Palestinians will go get food, let's say from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation or the UN or something. They'll get food. Hamas thugs will come around and take it. And if they want it back, they'll have to go to the Hamas market and buy it back at, 3 times the price or whatever it was. So, they're the guys with the guns for the most part. They're the ones who call the shots. And so it's a combination of all sorts of stuff. And that's how this amount of food gets in Hamas's hands. It's not that they're robbing every truck in the dead of night. It's that they're in control of the system. They are in control of the trucks when they come in. They control where they go and when they get there. They're in control of what is on the trucks once it's unloaded into the warehouse, and so on and so forth. And so they control the market in that way as well. So once it's in Hamas's hands, it's a combination of hoarding the food and selling the excess food, whatever Hamas wants to sell or doesn't need, depending on, its needs, at much higher prices. Because again, it's just basic supply and demand. Hamas takes tons of the supply right out of the market, right off the top, and then they sell the rest. And so demand is through the roof.
What do you think is the biggest flaw of the media coverage of this issue?
I think the biggest flaw is probably the there's I think it comes down to taking Hamas's word for what's happening. We had this a bit, I mean, we had it throughout the war when we were told that that medical services and medical officials and hospital officials and all that in Gaza would say this number of people were shot by Israel and all that. And the officials are, again, Hamas, right? That is who the government is, and that is who is in control. So they're in control of the information. So there's something very similar that's happening now with the food, whereas you have essentially coming from Hamas the message that 78 people were shot trying to get food from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation today, and so therefore the GHSF has to go. And we have to be brought back into the process because we're the only ones who can reduce the chaos of bringing in food and distributing it. I think that a big part of the problem is just taking at face value whatever Hamas and Hamas-linked sources are saying, because they are delegitimizing any non-Hamas distribution of aid. And so it colors the way the world sees the crisis. The world now sees the crisis, because they believe the things that Hamas says, as the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not bringing in much food, and the Israelis are shooting them when they're lining up to get the food. So that's not curing hunger, because they're just shooting people and this and that. And so the world sees it as a ballooning crisis, when in fact it's an attempt to get things under control. And if these agencies worked with Israel and worked with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, if UN agencies and other NGOs, you could eat away at the problem and chip away at it and really make a difference. But the perception among these groups is that what's happening now is so dangerous and so corrupt and so useless in the grand scheme of things that it's making the problem worse. And that's not true, that it's making the problem worse at all. And it's not true that people aren't getting food. And so it colors the way that they see it, and therefore they refuse to participate. And you could have a widespread, sort of coalitional effort here to get food and aid to people in Gaza when and where the West wants it to go. And instead, you have essentially a kind of almost like a form of BDS. You almost have like this boycott situation where everybody throws their hands up and refuses to participate. And I think the main driver of that is just these ridiculous Hamas talking points and a lot of the exaggerated claims and stuff coming out of there.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you, Jim.
If you're watching us on YouTube, you can read Seth's full article by clicking here on our digital magazine.
Next year, will be our last season. The network will be ending The Late Show in May.
In a surprise move, CBS announced it's going to be sunsetting The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Our Amy Delora reports on what this might mean for the rest of late night television.
Yeah, I share your feelings. It's not just the end of our show, but it's the end of The Late Show on CBS. I'm not being replaced.
Much has been made of The Late Show cancellation, and naturally, CBS is taking a lot of arrows from those claiming the move is somehow connected to President Donald Trump. Trump, of course, celebrated the decision, writing on Truth Social, quote, "I absolutely love that Colbert got fired," predicting Jimmy Kimmel is next, and singing praises to Greg Gutfeld.
Go yourself.
Colbert's show debuted right around the time Trump was steamrolling the GOP competition for the presidential nomination in 2015. If everything is Trump's fault, it seems odd it took 10 years for Trump to put whatever pressure it was on CBS to yank Colbert off the air. Still, the unified support from other late-night hosts is indicative of where the genre is in the 21st century.
And to me, I like to think that people come to a comedy show to kind of get away from the things, you know, the pressures of life, wherever it might be. And I love political humor, don't get me wrong, but it's just what happens was people wind up cozying too much to one side or the other.
Long gone are the monologues written to make the audience and viewers laugh. Now, late-night show hosts toe the party line and have an attitude of self-importance, congratulating themselves for their work.
The shows that you now seek to cancel, censor, and control, a not insignificant portion of that $8 billion value came from those f***ing shows. That's what made you that money. Shows that say something, shows that take a stand, shows that are unafraid. And not to, believe me, this is not a, we speak truth to power. We don't. We speak opinions to television cameras. But we try. We try every night.
The financials also don't match Stewart's claims. Colbert's show was hemorrhaging anywhere from $40 to $50 million per year against a budget of nearly $100 million, according to CBS. Colbert's ratings peaked with an average audience of 3.1 million viewers, and Colbert's latest ratings are his worst yet, with an average of 1.9 million viewers. It isn't surprising critics have said late-night television has turned primarily into late-night therapy sessions for liberals.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go.
We want to make a show that's both cathartic to do and cathartic to watch.
And the connection to Trump is more likely correlation than causation. After all, Trump was not a factor in Trevor Noah bolting The Daily Show.
My time is up. Yeah, but in the most beautiful way.
And when James Corden's The Late Late Show went dark,
the best thing for me and the best thing for us as a family is to put down some roots in London, and it feels absolutely right in every single way.
His show was supposedly losing $20 million a year. Greg Gutfeld of Fox News has managed to fill a void for conservatives looking for late-night television that caters to their politics. Result is higher ratings than Colbert, Fallon, and Kimmel.
I hope you'll accept my apology, and I just want to give you the opportunity. Is there anybody you'd like to apologize to right now yourself?
No.
No?
For all the talk of Trump as a threat, there's no denying the impact he has on media ratings and revenue.
CNN's ratings would be in the toilet without Donald Trump.
Network executives may see the writing on the wall. Trump gives a boost. So if late-night shows are already losing money with him in office, it could only mean a continual downward spiral once he leaves office for good. Back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Amy. You can read that story and the rest of the articles we discussed in today's episode at washingtonexaminer.com and our digital magazine. This has been your Inside Scoop. I'm Jim Antle, your host. We'll catch you next time.